Welcome to the iHemp Hour. My name is Dave Craybill. I'm with iHemp Michigan. iHemp Michigan's goal is to educate, inform, and promote the research, development, and cultivation of industrial hemp in Michigan. iHemp Michigan advocates for wellness in people and the planet through hemp, and it begins with the farmer. On today's show, we're going to talk about finance and fiber. First off is Blaine Bechtold, a partner and important member of iHemp Michigan, retired from the USDA. So Blaine, take her away.
Hey, thanks, Dave. So an important topic we've been all dealing with over the last few years has been the banking and trying to get financing and trying to move it forward. Even though the Safe Banking Act got passed, we've still had resistance from the banks in order to do lending for the hemp industry. So Bob's going to be able to update us on all that. We're looking forward to hearing from Bob. Also, a couple of things I want to update you on is we have a hemp mask fundraising project that we're starting. $75 helps us get 5 masks and gets you a really cool t-shirt, which we'll show a little later in the show. Also, it's a link to the email that went out regarding today's show on that, and we're really excited. We don't know exactly where those are going to be donated. We're hoping, and where our goal is to put them into an agricultural sector somewhere, but all those final details are being worked out. But we are having the mask made, and they're coming, and we're trying to raise about $2,500, what we're trying to raise, and I think it'll be a good cause to promote hemp and show hemp can be used in many different ways, and this is certainly a great way for it. These masks are reusable, they can be washed, and they're pretty comfy to wear, so we're looking forward for that. Also, I got an email today for an experienced farmer looking for work. There's a couple guys that probably college guys, age grads, I'm assuming. They're looking to be hired and use their experience in farming around the Lansing and Kalamazoo area. Jamie Davison is who put this out, and you can email or text him. His text number is 734-645-1386, and we'll have this information up on the site also later on if people want to get some experience, maybe help or a little bit of help for this summer for that. Also, at the end of the show, we're going to give you an update on the great, some more recipes. This one is a ginger and hemp heal yourself power. It's a smoothie, and so I haven't had a chance to taste this one myself. Normally I do, but wasn't able to find all the ingredients yesterday when I went shopping. So we'll try that this afternoon. But it's yummy, yummy, and it's going to be given at the end of the show. So with that, Mike, I'm going to give it over to you to introduce Bob.
Hey, it's Mike Brennan from MITechNews. I'm the editor here, and I produced this show post-event so that we record it, and then we'll be able to send you out that recording if you weren't able to watch live. And we have calling in from Oklahoma, you'll notice that when he starts to talk with his accent, is Bob Moore, who is a specialist in agricultural financing, agricultural equipment, anything to do with farming. He's been working with a lot of farmers. He's a third-generation banker. And so he knows his farming stuff, and now he's specializing in hemp, which is an area that a lot of the folks involved in hemp are having trouble getting normal, legitimate banks, as it were, or whatever you want to call them, to finance. He works with 40 different alternative financial types that can help you solve a lot of your problems with equipment, land, whatever you need, factoring, purchase orders, all sorts of stuff. And so Bob's the expert in that area, and I'm not. So I'm going to turn you over to Bob now, and Bob, take it away.
Today, the USDA came out with a press release yesterday, and one thing that hemp farmers need to consider, you can get crop insurance for your hemp product. So that's something you consider. And it will help whether you go through me or anybody else. You want to consider crop insurance. And the other side of it is they've adjusted the rules, and you can apply and get on the hemp program with the USDA office and the Farm Services Agency. So a lot of people call me, and the first thing I say was, are you signed up with your Farm Services office? It's like, go sign up, because you never know what you qualify for, and you need to apply for whatever they have available. So get in the system with the USDA Farm Services Agency. Lane, you looked at the new rules a little bit. Do you have comments or questions or?
Well, so what they've done with the new rules, it was a little bit more stringent. You had to have contracts and everything else on it. So they've loosened that up a little bit from what I read the other day. So it might be a little easier for people to apply for and get FSA loans, USDA loans, than it was before. Because before you had to have the contracts in place and a lot of different things. Now you still have to show repayment ability, even if you don't have a contract in place, right? So they're going to look at, have you been farming? Have you got the income? If you lost that crop out there, could you still repay your loan? But it's nice that they've taken that requirement off for having set contracts or having a contract before they can do a loan. You mentioned crop insurance. So right now, the regular risk management crop insurance, of course, that deadline's passed, but there is the weather-related insurance that you can get, which might be a good thing to look into also. And there's also hail you could get. That you can get anytime. So those are some great things there. Now, as far as any other banking goes, right now, Bob, you probably know a little bit more about that than I do, what's available with those banks. But it just seems like right now, Bob, maybe you can comment on this, is that we just seem to have the banks still reluctant, even though we've passed the safe banking law out there. Why are banks still hesitant or resistant towards helping hemp farmers?
The banks are just scared to death. Yeah, I've got letters from the USDA. I've got a stack of letters from the USDA saying it's legal. There's no reason why you shouldn't do it, type deal. And the banks will just look at you and say, "Well, I don't get audited by the USDA. I get audited by the FDIC and the banking examiners." Different groups, and they are just still scared of it. They still look at it as it's a illegal substance, a drug, and until they're told really in strong language, they just don't want. Most of the banks don't want anything to do with it. And I've had people say the husband had been in business for 20 years, his wife got licensed, CBD license, and the next thing you know, his bank of 20 years closed every account that he had out. Things that, but they was afraid that they were going to run the money through his business, which they probably would have, but still, the bank just on their own just closed all of his accounts out, and he'd been with them for 20 years. So that's a horror story there, because you hate to lose those old time relationships that you can pick up a phone and borrow money on things. So I don't see that's happening I think 5 years from now, it won't be a problem. I think every bank will be doing it. But today, the banks are still just very shy of doing it. There might be one out of, 5,000 that will actually jump in there and let you have an account.
I mean, I can understand the banks that want to give me something, I mean, I might not be, a good risk for them. But one of the things that was interesting that I learned yesterday, I did print out there's a 3-page release that came out to the banks. The title of it is Providing Financial Service to Customers Engaged in the Hemp-Related Businesses. And it's interesting. I didn't know the banks had to do this, that they have a suspicious, let me get the words here, suspicious business activity report that they have to fill out if they suspect somebody is laundering money through the bank or something like that.
Yes, it's that they have that. And if anytime you deposit over $5,000 cash, used to be at $10,000, but now it's $5,000 cash. They have to do a report. So you don't ever want to put in more than $5,000 cash in a bank. And most of these CBD stores are cash. They're cash only stores.
Yeah, they have no way to do that. Yeah. So 4,999 is that level then, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even put that close.
If I get that much cash, I'll let you know. At one time. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting to see that that's part of their concern or problem with that.
So one of the questions was about native owned, and I'm in Oklahoma where there's 39 different Indian tribes. As a matter of fact, I was meeting with one of the Indian tribes yesterday. Indian tribes is still federal land at the moment. They're the tribes in the tribal land. They don't have they're still a red light on them. They do not have the green light to go forward because it's still a federal prohibited product on the cannabis side. of it. So they're still, even though they can win it, they would wind up in a lawsuit, and they don't want to spend their time and money in a lawsuit when they know a little bit of time that will clear up. So the Indian tribal cannabis is it's on the start line, but it's not going forward at the moment.
You talked a little bit about credit card, and our experience with iHemp Michigan. Even when we tried to get an account, it was very difficult. We did find a bank that was going to work with us, but one of the requirements they had when we signed up is that we don't carry CBD related products, things that are made with CBD stuff. And they would do our banking, and they have worked with us very well, and we're very happy with them. But you mentioned credit card. Can you talk a little bit about the credit card thing there?
Well, when I first started this deal, I went into some of these stores, and they were taking credit cards, and so I'm on a meeting like similar to this, and one of the investment bankers in New York, and I said, well, some of these stores are taking credit cards, and he says, oh no, they're not. He said they're, as far as the general public is, they're a ATM transaction. So what happens is, if you see these most stores, and there might be exception, but 99% of them, they're an ATM machine. So you're actually withdrawing the money from your account via ATM and then turning it around and giving it to the merchant again. Even though it may just look like one transaction, for them in the bookkeeping, it's two transactions. It's taking it out from an ATM, and then they're giving them cash to buy the product. And it's like, really? This is when I first started. So I hustled around, and I found a company that you kind of have to have some overseas ties, which I've done overseas factoring for years and years. And I've had a long-term relationship with like Bibby that's been in business for, almost 400 years in the UK. So that kind of helped me get some doors open. And so I now have a company that offers credit card merchant programs. So if you got sales, or you think you can have better sales by offering a credit card payment, holler at me. The USDA, I tell people, it doesn't make me any money, but if you can borrow money at the USDA, you should. It's cheaper money. It takes you forever to get it done, but it's a doable deal if you hang in there. I do represent one lender that specializes in USDA B&I loans. So we do the B&I loans, business and industrial loans. So some of this stuff is not really for the growers, it's for the and processors, and that's really what we need is in use for the hemp.
Yeah, you're right. It's just not for the farmers. I mean, we do need the people that are going to put the processing equipment up, and the harvesting equipment and all that stuff. That's an important part of this whole thing too. And they're having just as many problems, from what I understand from them too. So when they're trying to get loans on that.
So, and people will ask me questions, and it really comes down to if they want to get financing, it's easier to borrow money on equipment that you're buying. It doesn't have to be new; it can be used equipment, but it's a lot easier to borrow money if you're buying equipment versus just operating expenses. The one thing you cannot borrow money on is for money for payroll, and that's usually what people need. So be careful how you spend your money. Hold that money for payroll, and then borrow the money for equipment with something with a serial number.
Also, Bob, you're able to loan money for land, right? I mean, you do land. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
We do real estate. We do real estate loans. As a matter of fact, the 420 program is getting a lot of attention. Now we're getting a lot of activity. We've got several $1 million in the process of getting from start to finish at the moment, and it's on people wanting to buy the land that they rented, or they want to buy the land next door to them, and add another greenhouse operation next to it, or build another building to it. And they've got land that's on free and clear, so those are doable deals. Again, I tell people, if you can borrow money at the USDA, do it. It's cheaper. It takes you a long time to get there. Most people start out with the USDA and then they'll come back and say, we don't care. We just need to get it done. We'll pay the commercial rate type deal to just get it done. So again, USDA, you need to sign up with the program and get involved with their program.
We'll do a future program on signing up for FSA, how to go about doing that, because many farmers that are doing farming now hemp have never worked with the office there, and it's a simple process, but it's one that we need to get done. Now this year for Michigan, we're not required necessarily to certify the acres for Michigan, but I think everybody should do that this year. Get used to going in and certifying. It's a nice little map you get out of it. But we'll cover that in a little more detail in another show.
Matter of fact, the ones that are listening, if you're already signed up, there's some benefits and there's some things available to you on this hemp program. If you're already signed up on the 2014 program, then your deal is going to go forward on the 20. And so you're actually, there's some things available to you because you already signed up last year that's available this year that's not available to everybody.
We're getting a little questions on the 420 program. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
It's basically a combination of, it's more of a greenhouse with real estate loan. It's not just real estate. It's a program where you buy the land or you mortgage the land and you want to build another building on it.
Like a greenhouse or something like that.
Right, a grow house.
Yeah.
So a lot of the real estate loans, they want a straight real estate with a deed and a mortgage, and this has a deed mortgage, but then you're building something on it. So it's a little different. It's a little harder.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mike. With that B&I loan, someone could get a loan for a decorticator?
The B&I loans, again, it's the USDA program, so the list is, a mile long, but there's hurdles to jump through, but it's doable. And they're doing them, and they're pretty cheap long-term loans. I mean, you can get 30-year loans. You can't give 30-year loan at the, commercial bank, no matter what.
What is the easiest loan for somebody in the hemp community to get? Would it be the equipment loan, Bob, or what, something else?
The best thing is really if you're a processor and you're selling to a retail store, you've got something that you're creating an invoice on. The easiest thing is accounts receivable financing, because that improves your cash flow. And from there, you can do purchase orders, and then you can do your contract advance on that. That's the best way. And people, it takes you a little more time because people will tell me, well, they've been selling to the same people for years, and it's just on a handshake. Well, you can't really borrow money on a handshake because you've had a buyer for the last 3 years. You need to have it in writing.
And a lot of your deals that you get where you have different kinds of programs is you can get half of the money up front and don't have to make payments for 90 days. Now, I'm not sure which program that is. I know we've discussed that.
Some of those things that were available 60 days ago are not available at the moment. I've had companies that I've done business with. For one company was in business for 38 years. First time they've ever quit taking applications. So because of this, the virus, they've some of these programs are on hold at the moment, and some companies are not doing any new applications until they know they can service it properly. So they've really taken it on the chin. I mean, this one company's in 38 years in business, and they were pretty upset that they, the first time ever, quit taking new applications.
Wow.
So some of those programs, and you don't know when they're going to open back up, because I've had one call me and said, we're going to open back up. And then 2 days later, they called and said, let's just put everything back on hold. So
Bob, we have a
there's
question
a lot
here
of questions.
from Eric. He says, USDA states we need at least 3 years if a Schedule F to qualify for farm loans. Is there any way around this?
Basically, it's easier. It's easier. You fill out the forms, and you let them tell you no. You fill out the forms. Don't just don't think you don't qualify on those
I'm
things.
assuming Eric,
Especially right now. There's some things that are waived that wouldn't fly a year ago.
Okay. I'm assuming, Eric, you tried to apply for a loan or have been working with USDA, FSA, probably to try to get a loan.
No, we've done a whole lot of USDA work. Anyway, that's kind of, it's not real fancy. It's a lot of work, but you can get there.
Okay. I've helped a few go through the process with my consulting work, and it's a little tedious. I mean, there are things but you can get through it. It just takes a little while. Yeah, it just takes a little while. All right. Well, Bob, thanks. Any other questions for Bob right now? If anybody has?
Bob, when we were talking earlier this week, you were saying something about, and this maybe ties in with what Gary on the show, that you'd like to take a look at the possibility of doing, for instance, hemp toilet paper or hemp hand towels, that sort of thing. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what your thinking is on that?
I know I have worked with different states on the Department of Commerce in different states, and I have sent letters asking for joint ventures with like Kimberly Clark. They do paper company. They're a big paper company, and there's some other companies but we need a product. And then there's 20,000 good uses for hemp besides smoking it. Smoking is probably the worst thing out of the 20,000, but we need to make jobs, and we need a product that our farmers can sell. And making toilet paper and paper towels, it makes wonderful paper. I mean, that's why it's got a history on that. I'm Bob Moore, and I'm in Oklahoma, but I do commercial financing nationwide. BobMooreFinancing.com.
I think we're going to switch over to Gary and have Gary give us a little update on what's happened in the commercial world, the business world. Behind the scenes, we've been working this year quite a bit with businesses to get them engaged. We've got to have businesses that want the product that we're growing, whether it be the CBD or whether it be the stock or whether it be the grain. I'll update you a little bit on grain in a minute, so we're trying to, we're still trying to figure out how to have I'm going to call it a business symposium more than a business expo, to be able to bring manufacturers this year together and let them know what's available, whether it be the building industry or the fiber or the fabric industry or the plastic industry. And Gary has been a great, trying to really work this hard with the plastics. And Gary, maybe you can give us an update.
Yeah, thanks, Blaine, and thanks, Bob, for that overview as well on the financing. So that might play into a little bit of when we talk about what is required in the infrastructure and equipment, such as the decorticator. But a little bit of an update, I would say that our existing pandemic issue has put a sense of urgency on biomass material for use of a domestic source for hemp fabric, paper, as Bob had mentioned, carbon fiber replacement, which I'll talk a little bit about the carbon fiber in that marketplace, which again is to make what are called thermoforming for automotive sector or other materials. If you can imagine a car panel versus just a bioplastic. The plastics industry, a lot of the plastic was coming from China. So there is a demand for an alternative sustainable bioplastic that is US made. And mostly I would say it's risk mitigation. It's really, as I think we all learned, it's especially the story about 90% of our pharmaceuticals coming from China. Well, what happens if we've got a disruption in supply chain? So there is, I think, going to be some more of an urgency coming out for some of these product developments, and I would suspect that a company like Kimberly-Clark, Georgia Pacific, even a Dow Chemical, they're going to start, I think, putting more resources into looking at alternative materials that they can then integrate to their products. So that product, as Bob mentioned, those buyers is what's going to drive really the farming and the demand for industrial uses of the material. The existing hurdles still remain as the infrastructure, and 80% of the capital that's going to be required is in these specialty decorticators, also degumming operations. So Patagonia, for example, they buy hemp fabric. They don't buy hemp fiber. It needs to be degummed and then spun into a fabric before they're going to integrate that into a Patagonia jacket or a Carhartt. So right now, that degumming operations is very capital intensive and doesn't exist here in the U.S. on a large scale. So those are, I would say, is the decortication, the gumming, and then what I represent is a specialty drying and pulverizing equipment. We could actually pulverize the hemp material into less than the size of a human hair and dry it, that material for the bioplastics. Is what they want is a very, very small, very, very dry material so that they can then easily integrate that into their systems, what they call as a drop-in material. In other words, if you're going to combine hemp with a polypropylene, or if you're going to make a replacement MDF board, such as your Trek board, they want that material very, very dry. And so all those equipment, those processing centers, it's the way that I relate it to is it would be hard to finance a CBD production facility if you didn't have buyers for CBD. So in other words, if you're going to invest in a CO2 system for extraction, you better have a buyer for it on the other end. And so that has been the challenge that we've had. I would say we've made tremendous headway, and I have seen a lot more interest even within the last several months of people looking at equipment, because I do believe these buyers are emerging, and I do believe strongly that as soon as we start to get some of these processing centers up and running, that's going to accelerate product development. And that is, again, the other part of the missing equation here is getting enough material processed. There's plenty of material out there, retted bales of hemp, but it needs to be processed before we can then send it to a Kimberly-Clark or a Dow Chemical. They will have a very specific specification for the material, what they're looking for. So I think there's still a void in testing of the material. Every company seems to have a tweak on what kind of material they want. And then once they accept that material, they're going to want to have security in the supply, and they want to minimize any type of variations. So they're going to want to make sure that if we get the material to supply their needs, that it's very consistent and meets their material specs. The good news that comes out of that is then we're going to need farmers to grow the right crop. And there's going to be a little bit more security and the ability to contract out your land or your farming, I do believe. And because then those buyers, such as a Kimberly-Clark or Ford Motor Company, whoever's using material, they don't want to have an interruption of supply. They want to make sure that if you're going to grow it, they want to buy it, and they're going to want it processed a very specific way. So that is kind of the update. I would also say probably what has been a new focus, which has been very interesting, is this whole concept of carbon farming. We all know that there is a big need or a sense of urgency about our carbon reduction. greenhouse gases. So that's carbon dioxide. So how do we reduce the amount of carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? The best way is through trees, and other plant material actually absorbs carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide then goes into the ground, or in the case that we're trying to do with these industrial applications, is that carbon is then stored in the material, which goes into the F-150 Ford pickup truck. So in other words, the hemp material is a superior plant material to help as a atmospheric vacuum cleaner. So in other words, we're seeing a lot of, I think even the president had mentioned that they want to grow 1 million trees. And the reason for that is that we really, the push is that we can clean up our atmospheric carbon dioxide and reduce greenhouse gases by basically planting more plant material. The good news for our industry is that the amount of carbon that can be removed from the atmosphere through hemp is very 4 times as more carbon can be absorbed than an acre of if you're doing a 1-to-1 ratio, than an acre of forest. And it's a circular crop, so it comes up every year, and we can grow that product. So I do believe that there's going to be some more interest in product life cycle and having materials that are carbon negative. And what I mean by that is, we all see these big windmills that are being erected for creating clean energy. Well, most of those windmills are made out of carbon fiber. So the actual energy or carbon that was produced, that produced greenhouse gases as a result of manufacturing that windmill, it's going to take a few years before we get back to what I call carbon neutral. So the opportunity is for a hemp plant could be carbon negative. In other words, not only can it absorb the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but if we could create a carbon fiber replacement using hemp, now that same windmill made out of hemp fiber would actually be considered a carbon negative material. So I do believe there's some more analysis is going to be done that will drive the infrastructure build out for degumming, and then that will eventually drive what type of hemp is going to be grown based solely on supply and demand. So in other words, if you've got a big customer that wants to purchase a certain amount of hemp and the price is there, have I known, the farmers are very smart, and they will figure that one out, and you will grow it based upon what is being contracted out. So a lot of focus on creating this infrastructure, a lot more sense of urgency, I do believe. So will that happen in 2020? Very limited, but I do see some great things happening in 2021.
Well, thanks. That gives us all a little hope then with moving forward on things.
Now, Gary, let me ask you a question. Do you see some way of maybe working with Bob? One of the things that Bob and I were chatting about earlier was he was interested in maybe doing some kind of joint venture project, getting back to the paper aspect of it. And certainly, I know you've been working with the state of Michigan, Gary, to get them involved in this to create a textile industry here in the state. Is there any kind of synergy there that might come together, you think?
Well, I'm not real, I guess, to wait on the government, I think I'll grow old. I think that this is really, this is a business. You know, if we can make money, there's going to be investors, we get buyers. If we have a competitive advantage over China, if there's security in the supply chain, I think even the U.S. military, the U.S. military is very interested in hemp fabric for netting, seat belts, other materials. They are not going to buy that hemp fiber from China, period. So there is a huge opportunity for that. Once we understand what is going to be required and we start getting some of these buyers, this infrastructure for decortication, the degumming, the specialty drying and milling, I do believe will be there. If we wait on the government, if the government wants to buy it, then I think the financing is going to come from those investors. I do see a sense of more interest from some of the investors. You're going to have versus the price volatility of maybe some of the CBD. But if you can grow a tri-crop, in other words, if you're still getting, let's say, 6% CBD, but your mass volume for a tri-crop is 40,000 pounds per acre versus, let's say, 4,000 pounds per acre, but you now have a fiber buyer, you have a buyer for your herd material for plastics, then you really are mitigating that risk, and you're seeing these longer term contracts, which I do believe that the investment community is going to come in a big way, because now they see that they've got some security and the buyers, and I do believe also that's going to follow that is going to be the Kimberly-Clarks of the world, and some of these companies who are right now, I don't. They're still looking at the hemp and saying, hey, is there enough material out there that can be processed? There's plenty of material out there, but it's just there's not enough of the infrastructure, which is really capital intensive. You got a degumming operation could be, a commercial degumming operation could be north of $20 million.
Wow.
So you're going to have somebody really serious with some capital to invest in that operation. And as well as they're going to say, okay, how many yards of fabric can we produce and who's going to buy it? And so, but once we start getting some of these, I would say, these first one or two facilities up and running, and they're seeing that hemp is viable, I do believe we're going to see an acceleration of that curve of not only infrastructure build out, but also demand.
Do we currently have processing here in Michigan? I've heard people talk about that. I don't know if we do or not. Do we?
At least for right now, from the milling standpoint, it's very, very limited. I don't, Blaine or Dave, you guys may know if somebody's got a decorticator, but again, it's very, very limited at this point.
We're hearing rumblings, but have not seen a decorticator in Michigan.
Yeah, it's just fundamental. I mean, just back to Bob's point. I mean, if somebody's going to have to put a personal guarantee, if you're going to asking somebody for a loan for a couple of $1 million, they're going to say, yeah, I'll loan you the money, but how much is your house worth? You're going to have to sign off on that. Somebody that, or there's going to have to be some sort of collaboration with a company like a Kimberly-Clark who's going to finance that, who wants to be vertically integrated. And I do believe that those discussions may be happening, because I do believe that there's going to be some additional testing, but we may see some of that pull through. Right now, we're still trying to find buyers. You're still trying to get the equipment financed, but there could be some more joint ventures being developed where a company is looking for maybe a circular raw material source versus, a forest, like a Kimberly-Clark, if they own their own forest and they're not wanting to wait 40 years before they cut down the trees, and yet they think this might be a viable option, they may want to jump in and finance that equipment.
Hey, Bob, is there something that you could do to help in this process? Is there some way of financing some of this that you can bring to the party? Oh, I think he's muted.
Not muted? Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's muted. So I can read his lips sort of. All right, there he goes.
All right. It's just like Gary said. So you got to have financial statement. You got to have somebody's got to have financial statement and willing to sign on dotted line. The way you reduce your liability is to have it pre-sold. So that's kind of, you're going to have a bunch of chicken and egg deals, but you're going to have a contingent contract that says, if I can make it, you'll buy it.
And to that point, Mike, to your point from the governmental standpoint, what would be helpful, not, saying, hey, can the government come in and help finance a $10 million operation? But I do believe there's funds out there for helping for testing. I know Michigan State University has offered their assistant, Michigan Tech here in Michigan. But those universities, and that normally if they're going to put time and resources in there, even those specialty department for the packaging or the construction departments, they're going to want to get paid for their time. And so it would be helpful if they're really serious from a governmental standpoint to help the farming. Now, whether that comes from the government or maybe that comes from another farming organization or the manufacturers association or the chemical association. I do believe there's some funds out there, but that would be helpful, because if a company says, hey, we want to look at hemp for as a replacement for MDF for materials, could we get some research done, get some more material processed for them so they can look at that? Because then at the outcome of that research, they may say, hey, we like this works out well, we like the carbon reduction, the sustainability, it's able to be used in our existing tooling system. Hey, we're ready to buy 20 million pounds if you can find it. Well, then that's what's going to accelerate the equipment financing. To back to Bob's point, I got 20 million pounds pre-sold. That's financeable.
Bob, what are your thoughts?
You can't wait on the government type deal, even though there's money out there to be played with, and there's things to apply for. And I think probably the biggest grants available is probably the medical side of it on that deal. I think there's still a huge amount of market side from the government. I think there's one deal of doing a private public grant proposal with the USDA. But again, we've got to find somebody that's a pretty decent sized corporation that wants to do a public-private combination, and then there's some funds available for that.
I mean, somebody like Kimberly Clark, like you talked about earlier.
Right.
Blaine, you got anything? Or
This has been a great conversation and a lot of great information given out. My mind has been spinning throughout this whole thing a little bit about, where to go forward with things. Like we talked about, we really need some kind of decoordination equipment here to be able to do that next process, right? To learn, okay, and then of course it's going to be the next problem, just like we have with CBD, kind of the little red hen thing, right? So we get the product made, we get the fiber, we get the bass, to make concrete and other stuff. Now who wants it? Who wants to play with that? So that's why we're trying to bring this all together with the manufacturers and move this forward. We hear there's all the great things, so we'll just kind of see.
I will give you an update on stuff that I received yesterday, and I received this earlier that the liquor sales across the country was up 250%. Well, in Oklahoma, I get that stuff all the time, and the CBD sales were up tremendously. And they in 1 month they had almost $10 million worth. The state collected almost $10 million in sales tax.
Really?
From the CBD store and M&M stores.
Wow.
So that was up huge, just like 4 months worth of product in 1 month.
people have time on their hands, apparently, huh?
That's right. So I assume it's the same in every state.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes or so left, guys. Where do you want to take it from here?
Let's see if there's any other questions we need to
We
answer.
have your recipe, Blaine.
Yeah, I just want to see if there's any other questions we need, but I think we've covered most of them.
Yvonne is asking if there's a biz plan for that. They're planning on 10,000 acres of hemp fiber. Is that correct? So, yep, really need the processing in place before you commit to that growing that much.
Now, Dave, is that something you're seeing on the Facebook side?
In the chat, no, in the Zoom chat.
Zoom chat, okay.
Oh, it was to me. I'm sorry.
That's
So,
all right.
yeah, well, so Yvonne, let's see. Bring about a group as a farmer guild. Okay, so yet these things will develop as we go. We're going to have to really identify the steps in the supply chain, and that's what Gary's been working on. Once we have purchase orders in place for finished goods, and we have to kind of backtrack and backfill. So this is probably going to be a 2 to 3 year process to get this thing going, don't you think, Gary?
Was that you talking to me on that? Yeah. It's funny. I just got a text. Somebody said they want more hemp fiber powder for the paper. So this is out in California. So that's exciting. I was looking at that, saying, okay, there's your demand. Back to Bob's point, is when you start getting texts like that, where people are looking for more material, especially right now where we're at, saying we're trying to test this material. That to me is the most important thing I can do, is get them some material to test it. Because then if they say this looks great, the quantities they're going to need is going to be very significant. And that's what's going to really drive the infrastructure to be able to put in a processing center, but also then have a home for the farmers to send their product for milling. But hopefully that's I would love to start to see some things towards the end of this year being developed, either manufacturing equipment, so that in 2021 we really are starting to see some real developments, and I think that'll accelerate some of this additional infrastructure build out, especially in 2021.
I see our illustrious leader John Freeman joined us.
Hello, John. Oh, I've been here. I just been spying.
Okay. How you get your video
I got a question though. If there's something with the U.S. patent in the United States, does it apply to Red China? Are those patents enforced from their products here?
No.
Okay. What I'm looking at, I've got $10,000 I want to invest, and I've been working with the Android, with AI, with artificial intelligence. And a lot of that comes out of China right now, and I'm trying to get that back in the United States, as far as manufacturing using Dell, and then bioplastic skeletons. And I'm going all over this right now, and then what would it take to make them here? And I think it's a really good thing for. Our bioplastic from industrial hemp will way outlast the oil-based plastic. The skeleton, using Henry Ford's formula, can be a lot stronger and lightweight than the steel that they use in these androids now. And so I'm going all over the place on this, and I just want to get all the information correct before I share it.
Okay.
But I think there's a real market in it.
All right. Thanks, John. So Blaine, I think it's about time for the recipe.
Hey. All right. We can do that. Charles, yes, we are talking about doing a fiber hemp farming thing. I don't know when that's going to happen, but yes. All right. So we'll talk about the smoothie, and then we'll talk about the other items we have, the mask and some other things. So this is a pretty good one. It's a ginger and hemp heal yourself power smoothie. The ingredients for this is 1 ripe banana, half a cup of frozen blueberries, which I still happen to have. When the blue crop comes out every year, I always get a bunch of that and freeze it. I still have some left. 1 heaped teaspoon of grated ginger, 2 heaped teaspoons of shelled hemp seeds, 1 heaped teaspoon of maca powder, and 1 teaspoon of tahini, Tahini, which I tried to find that yesterday in the store and I couldn't find that. But and 3 cups of water. And you just put that in a smoothie until it's all blended, and there you go. So I'm going to try one of them this afternoon. I didn't get a chance to get to that yesterday. Mute Jono.
Yep.
All right. So there's the
and
recipe.
Blaine,
We'll have it on the site. Yeah.
on those recipes, we're building a section on the website for all these recipes. They're going to be linked up on the individual show notes, and then I'm going to have a page linked up on iHemp Michigan with all our recipes.
Okay, that's excellent. So we'll keep putting them up there when I keep finding them, and this one I'll let you know how it works this afternoon. So the other thing we want to talk about again is going back to, I did get a request from somebody this week regarding if there's any smokable hemp flower out there anybody has. There is a buyer for that, so you can get a hold of me or just email iHemp and we'll get you in contact with that buyer for that. So the mask. So the masks are made of hemp. That's how this whole thing got started. Dave, can you bring up that picture of me in the mask by any chance?
You know, I'd love to. Let me
All right.
give you just a second.
Not a great picture of me, but it'll give an idea what the mask is about. So we're working with a group out of South Carolina on this, and we're pretty excited. Again, it's made out of hemp fiber. It's washable. It's reusable. It's not a throwaway one. And again, we're trying to work with some Department of Agriculture to get them to them. Somebody in agriculture, anyways, to use these is what we're trying to do. So there's the mask. There's me and my pretty face. So these have.
We have the iHemp Hour. If you ever have trouble looking for the login information each week, I'm going to be posting it on this page. It's right under events, iHemp Hour. And there's the mask, and here's the t-shirt.
Oh, there's the t-shirt. Can you show it? Oh, my, hold just a second. I got to move my picture out of the way. So you can see we got the logo on the front, and then we've got the hemp mask over Michigan on the back. So,
Yep.
So for $75, you'll get a t-shirt. Of course, any amount would be helpful. We're trying to raise about $2,500 is what we're trying to raise, and we thought this would be kind of a cool shirt to have. And it says on there, I've made a difference on the top in the UP, and then has the mask on the bottom, and then the iHemp logo on the front of it. So yeah, so we're trying to again, we're trying to raise $2,500 for that. Not a lot of money, but certainly it'd be great for people if they could help out a little bit. You are a little bit we can, and promote hemp by doing this whole process. So yeah. So I was going to give a little update on grain. We got just a minute or so to do. So I grew 75 acres of grain last year. Came out fairly well, not real good, but enough that I have some grain. And so I'm in the process of making that into some hemp oil. And then we're also going to try to use what they call the cake of that in a couple different ways. We're going to try that with making it into a hemp flour. And we're also going to use it in a ratio for livestock feed. Also, there's some experiments going on. I dropped off a product today at the lab to get tested of the spent biomass after it's already been extracted, using that in a feed. And then we're also going to try to use the stems, the stalks of the plant, and use that in a ratio with kind of like straw that they use in those. So there is some experiment going on with being able to use this for livestock feed. Right now, the requirement is that if you have your own animals, you can feed the hemp to it. That's not a problem. But if they're going into the marketplace, so to speak, you aren't able to use any hemp products until that gets approved. But I suspect that within another year or so, we'll probably have that. There are tests that are going on right now, and they're getting submitted to USDA. And if you want to keep updated on that, the Hemp Coalition, Hemp Feed Coalition, would be one to search for, and that'll have good information on there. So we're excited where that's going, and hopefully we're going to be able to find again another market for the hemp product here locally in Michigan. So, and that's what I have for today.